All right, so have you ever, like, wondered how to tell if someone is the real deal or just, like, a really good fake?
Yeah, like a visionary or a con artist.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a tough one,
Yeah, it really is.
especially these days, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Everyone's got a platform and they're trying to sell you something.
It really is.
An idea, a product, a way of life, even.
Yeah, and that's what this deep dive is all about.
Okay.
We are going to try to figure that out
I like it.
by taking a look at Claude Vorilhon,
Oh, wow.
better known as Rael,
Rail.
the founder of the Raëlism movement.
Interesting.
And we've got a bunch of sources on him, articles, a documentary summary, even a legal website.
Wow. A legal website. That's interesting.
So we are going to get all sides to the story.
Okay, cool.
But Rael's story is pretty wild.
Okay.
So to start with, he was a race car journalist.
Oh, wow.
He even had his own magazine called Autopop.
Okay.
But then
Yeah.
he claims to have met an alien
Oh, really?
in a volcanic crater in France.
What?
Yeah. So according to a couple of sources, including his Wikipedia entry, this was in 1973.
All right, 1973. Okay.
And he says the alien was small and green.
Okay.
And get this, it spoke French.
A French-speaking alien.
I know.
Right.
And this alien told Rael that humans were created by advanced extraterrestrials
Oh, wow.
called the Elohim.
The Elohim.
I know it's a lot to take in.
Yeah, so he meets this alien in a volcano in France.
Yep.
And this is like the basis for his whole belief system.
Pretty much.
I mean, would you believe a story like that?
I don't know. I had to see some proof.
Right. Like, what would it take to convince you?
I don't know. Pictures, videos, something.
Something, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to believe just on someone's word.
Yeah, I think so.
So was this a genuine experience or was it something he made up to get attention?
That's the big question, right?
Or like grifter or gifted?
Exactly.
Was he a true believer or was he just trying to build a following?
Yeah, and that encounter is really what led to the whole Raelian movement.
Okay, so he has this experience and then what?
Well, he said the Elohim gave him his new name, Rael,
Okay.
and instructed him to spread their message.
Okay.
So he founded MADCH just a year later, which then became the Raelian movement.
Okay, so this all happened pretty quickly.
Yeah, it did.
Wow.
And it's interesting because Raelism isn't just about aliens.
Oh, really?
They've got all these ideas from science fiction, spirituality, even like really different ideas about sexuality.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we'll get into that later.
Okay.
But first, I think we should talk about what Raelians actually believe.
Yeah, good point. What's at the core of all this?
Well, it all starts with the Elohim.
Okay, right, the aliens.
Yeah, they believe that these scientifically advanced beings created humans in a lab.
In a lab.
Yeah, like in a lab.
Interesting.
And Rael actually describes them as the creators of all life on Earth.
Wow, so they're like the ultimate creators in this belief system.
Right, and they believe that people like Jesus, Buddha, and Muhammad were prophets sent by the Elohim.
Oh, wow, so they see those figures as part of their own belief system.
Exactly.
And where does Rael fit into all this?
He claims to be the final prophet.
The final prophet. Wow.
That's sent to prepare humanity for the Elohim's return to Earth.
Okay, so they're not just hanging out on some distant planet. They're actually planning on coming back.
That's what they believe, yeah.
And what are humans supposed to do about this?
Well, they think we need to build an embassy for the Elohim.
An embassy for aliens.
I know, right?
That's pretty wild.
It is pretty wild.
But you know what else is interesting about the Razians is their symbol.
Oh, yeah, you're talking about the one that combines the swastika with the Star of David?
That's the one.
I mean, that's a pretty loaded symbol.
It is very controversial.
Why would they choose something like that?
Well, they claim it represents infinity in space and time.
Okay.
The Star of David represents space, and the swastika represents time.
But, you know, given the swastika's history, it's hard not to see it as provocative.
Yeah, some people definitely see it as a deliberate way to get attention.
And stir up controversy.
For sure.
So do you think they're being genuine, or is this just a calculated move?
It's hard to say.
Yeah, it's tough to know what's really going on there.
But either way, it's definitely a conversation starter.
Oh, for sure. Gets
Right.
people talking.
Yeah.
So let's shift gears a bit and talk about another aspect of Raëlism that often raises eyebrows.
Okay.
Their views on sexuality.
Right. They're known for being very open about sexes.
Yeah, they reject a lot of the traditional rules and taboos
Mhm.
around sex that you see in other religions.
So what do they believe exactly?
Well, they encourage open relationships, free love, pretty much anything goes as long as everyone consents.
Wow. That's pretty different from what most religions teach.
Definitely.
And what about this order of angels I've heard about?
Oh, yeah, that's a whole other layer.
Okay.
It's this group of women who, Rael says, are being prepared to welcome the Elohim when they return.
Welcome them. How?
Well, some sources suggest that these women are meant to engage with the Elohim sexually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's very controversial.
I can see why.
And it's actually led to accusations of promoting harmful practices.
So it's not just controversial from a moral standpoint, but there have been legal ramifications too.
Right.
Wow, this is definitely adding another layer to the whole grifter or gifted question.
Yeah, is this genuine belief in sexual liberation, or is there something more sinister going on?
It's a lot to think about.
It really is, and it just goes to show that understanding someone like Rael requires looking at the whole picture.
The good, the bad, and everything in between, because it's all connected and it's complicated.
Oh, for sure.
So welcome back
To our deep dive into the world of Raëlism.
Yeah.
So far, we've learned a lot about Claude Vorilhon, a.k.a. Rael,
Yeah.
and his movement
With a lot.
from those alien encounters to his pretty controversial views on sexuality.
And it's important to remember that everything we're saying is coming from the sources we've got.
Yeah.
Like Rael's own words articles, that legal website.
Right. We're just presenting the information.
Yeah.
It's up to you to decide what you think. We're just here to guide you on this deep dive.
Your tour guides through the world of realism.
Exactly. So one thing that really stood out to me is the diversity of Rael's followers.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Like, you've got people from all walks of life, different backgrounds, different beliefs, and yet they're all drawn to this pretty unusual set of ideas.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
It makes you wonder what it is about his message that resonates with so many different people.
Well, one theory is that a lot of Raelians are people who are seeking something outside of mainstream religion.
Okay, that makes sense.
They're drawn to that mix of spirituality and science that you find in Raelism.
Well, right. It's like they're looking for answers to the big questions.
Yeah.
But they don't find them in traditional religions.
Right.
They want something that speaks to their curiosity about the universe,
Yeah.
something a bit more modern.
Something that feels a bit more cutting edge.
Yeah, exactly.
And Raelism definitely taps into that fascination with extraterrestrial life, with the idea that we're not alone in the cosmos.
Right. And it's interesting how Rael interprets historical events through his beliefs.
Oh, yeah, like how he sees Jesus and Buddha as prophets sent by the Elohim.
Yeah. He even suggests that the Elohim have been influencing human progress all along.
Really?
Yeah. Like in one article, he claims that they were behind major inventions,
Like what?
like writing agriculture, even the internet.
Wow, okay.
That's a pretty bold statement.
It is.
It makes you wonder if he's rewriting history to fit his narrative, or if he genuinely believes this stuff.
Yeah, it goes back to that question of grifter or gifted.
Right.
Is he a true believer sharing what he thinks is a profound message? Or is he just crafting a story to gain power and influence?
And it's hard to say for sure.
Yeah, there's no easy answer.
On one hand, you have the claims of sexual misconduct,
Right.
the lack of proof for his cloning stories.
Yeah.
But then you have these devoted followers
Right.
who say he's changed their lives.
They talk about feeling empowered by his teachings.
It's a real head scratcher.
It really is.
I guess it just highlights the fact that people are complex.
Yeah, and someone like Rael, who is so controversial, is bound to attract both admiration and criticism.
It's like that saying, one person's savior is another person's fraud.
Exactly. It all depends on your perspective.
So how do we reconcile these opposing views?
Yeah. How do we make sense of all this?
It feels like there are so many layers to peel back.
Well, I think the key is to avoid black and white thinking.
Okay.
To acknowledge the complexities, the nuances, the possibility that Rael might be a mix of both good and bad.
To see him as a human being, not just a prophet or a villain.
Right, because he might genuinely believe in what he's saying,
Yeah.
even if some of his methods are questionable.
It's a good reminder that even those who claim to speak for higher powers are still human.
So flawed.
Exactly. So let's shift gears a bit.
Okay.
What happens to Raëlism after Rael is gone?
That's a good question.
He's not getting any younger.
Right.
And even though he believes in cloning, we haven't exactly seen any proof that it can grant immortality.
So what do the Raelians think will happen?
Well, some believe that he'll achieve immortality somehow
Okay.
through cloning or some other advanced technology.
And continue leading the movement forever.
Right. Others think a successor will emerge.
Has he hinted at anyone?
Not officially, but there are a couple of names that have been tossed around.
Like,
Well, there's Brigitte Boisselier, the scientist who led Clonaid,
okay.
and Pierre Gary, who heads up the international arm of the movement.
So it sounds like they're in a bit of a holding pattern,
Yeah, just waiting to see what happens.
waiting for the Elohim to return or for Rael to achieve immortality.
Right. But in the meantime, they're building their community, spreading their message, preparing for what they believe is a new era.
And that brings us to Rael's prediction about the Elohim's return to Earth.
In 2035.
Yeah, he's been pretty vocal about that.
It's like a countdown clock that's been ticking for decades.
And I imagine as we get closer to 2035, the anticipation will only grow.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens if that prediction doesn't come true.
Will it shake their faith, or will they just adjust their timeline?
Good question. But for now, they're holding on to their beliefs,
Yeah.
finding purpose in their community, and hoping for a future where humanity transcends its limitations.
A future guided by extraterrestrial wisdom.
It's a powerful vision.
It really is.
Whether you agree with it or not,
Yeah.
you have to admit it captures the imagination.
Yeah, it does.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
we just want to encourage everyone listening to keep thinking critically about what we've discussed.
Exactly. Don't just take our word for it. Do your own research.
Right.
Consider multiple perspectives and come to your own conclusions.
Because ultimately that's what matters most, forming your own informed opinion.
Well said. And if you want to learn more, we've got a full list of our sources in the show notes.
So welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah, we've been exploring Raëlism.
And it's been pretty wild.
Yeah, it has.
One thing that keeps coming up is the question of power.
Power,
Rael clearly has a lot of influence over his followers.
Right.
But is it a positive force, or is there something more manipulative at play?
That's a tough one.
Yeah, and we've seen accounts from former followers, some even alleging manipulation and control, even brainwashing.
Wow, yeah.
And there are also those accusations of sexual misconduct and exploitation.
Right, we have to acknowledge those even though they haven't been proven in court.
Right.
But then you also have those devoted Raelians
Yeah.
who view Rael as a true visionary, someone who's changed their lives for the better.
Right. It's like a total contrast.
Yeah, it is.
So how do we reconcile these conflicting narratives?
Yeah, how do we make sense of it all?
I mean, is it possible that Rael is both a charismatic leader and a manipulative figure? Well, that brings us back to the heart of our deep dive.
That blurry line between a visionary and a con artist.
Exactly.
I mean, is there even a way to figure out someone's true intentions?
It's not always black and white.
Not at all. And with Rael, it seems like there's a lot of gray area.
Yeah, he's a good communicator. He knows how to tell a story. Yeah, he's got that charisma
Yeah, that's certain.
that draws people in.
Definitely.
But is he using it for good, or is there a darker motive underneath?
It's hard to know for sure.
Right, it's really up to each individual to decide.
Each person has to look at the evidence and come to their own conclusion.
Yeah, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what stands out to you the most about Rael's story?
Honestly, it's the power of belief.
Okay.
Even with all the controversy, the accusations, the lack of evidence for some of his claims,
Yeah.
Raëlism still attracts followers and keeps spreading its message.
That's pretty amazing.
It really says something about the human need to find meaning.
Yeah, to believe in something bigger than ourselves.
Exactly.
And something else that struck me is the role of technology in Raëlism.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, they embrace science,
Yeah.
advocate for cloning.
Right.
They believe technology can solve all our problems.
Even grant us immortality.
Exactly. It's almost like they see technology as a savior.
That's interesting. It's like they're looking to technology to deliver on the promises that traditional religions have made.
Yeah, and that fascination with technology is all tied up with their belief in the Elohim,
Right. They see the Elohim as these advanced extraterrestrials.
who are both creators and potential saviors.
Right. It's a mix of scientific optimism and spiritual longing.
Yeah, and they see technology as the key to connecting with the Elohim and creating a new era of peace and enlightenment.
Wow. That's a pretty bold vision.
It is, and it raises questions about technology belief, the limits of human knowledge,
Big questions.
questions that we're still trying to answer.
And as technology keeps advancing, those questions are only going to become more important.
For sure. So as we come to the end of our journey, it feels like we're at a crossroads.
A crossroads, how so?
Well, some people see Rael as a visionary, a prophet,
Right.
leading us to a brighter future.
And others see him as a charlatan.
Yeah, someone who's
Yeah.
just using people for his own gain.
And we've seen evidence that supports both sides.
It's tough to say for sure.
Yeah. It's a complicated story full of contradictions.
But what do we do?
Well, that's the beauty of it. It challenges us to think critically,
Right, to weigh the evidence,
to see things from different perspectives.
and ultimately to decide for ourselves what we believe.
Exactly.
And that's what this deep dive was all about.
Yeah.
It wasn't about giving you a definitive answer.
Yeah.
It was about showing you the nuances,
Yeah.
the gray areas,
Right.
and encouraging you to think for yourself.
Because ultimately, that's what matters most.
So if there's one thing we want you to take away from this episode, it's this.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to question,
Yeah.
challenge, and dig deeper.
Absolutely.
Whether you find Rael inspiring or unsettling,
Right.
there's no denying it's a fascinating story.
It really is.
A story about the power of belief, the allure of the unknown,
Uh-huh.
and the search for meaning in a world that can feel pretty chaotic.
And with Rael predicting the Elohim's return in 2035,
Only time will tell what happens.
if his movement will be vindicated or his predictions will fade away.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Raëlism.